Thanks for tuning in to Operation Revenge. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now let's begin the story. The sun was setting behind the hills when I pulled into the gravel driveway of Vargas Estate, my family's vineyard. I'd imagined this moment for months, coming home for good. No alarms, no wildfires, no helicopters roaring overhead. I stepped out of the old pickup, stretching my aching back, the pain shooting down my spine as a reminder of why I was here. Retirement wasn't my choice. That crash landing in Montana made sure of that. 36 years old, and my career as a wildfire suppression pilot was over. I looked at the house, its white porch glowing faintly in the late light. I thought it would feel like coming home, like finally having a safe place to land. I had poured my life savings into this place. $600,000 to buy it, another small fortune to keep it running. It was supposed to be my refuge too. "Dad?" I called out as I grabbed my duffel from the truck bed. The door swung open, and there he was, Victor Vargas. His arms were folded tight across his chest, his face unreadable but cold, the way it always was when I was younger and came home with news that didn't impress him. "Elena," he said flatly, like he wasn't sure whether to be annoyed or surprised. "What are you doing here?" I forced a smile. "I'm home, Dad, for good. The doctors say I can't fly anymore, not with the back injuries. I thought I'd stay here for a while, maybe help out." From behind him, I heard laughter. Mateo, my younger brother, stepped onto the porch with a glass of wine in hand. His hair was slicked back, his shirt half-buttoned, like he'd just rolled out of a magazine shoot. "Wow," he said with a smirk. "The hero finally returns. Guess you ran out of fires to crash into?" I bit my tongue. Mateo had always been like this, sharp and smug, always ready with a dig. He ran a podcast about wine that barely made any money, but he talked like he owned Napa Valley. My father didn't laugh. He took one step forward, his jaw tightening. "You can't stay here, Elena." I blinked, certain I'd misheard him. "What?" "This is our home," he said, his voice as firm as stone. "Not a hostel for broken pilots. You've been gone for years, doing whatever it is you do. We don't have room for your problems." I felt my throat tighten. "Dad, I bought this place. I paid for—" "You did it for the family," he interrupted, his tone cutting. "Don't come back expecting gratitude." Mateo chuckled behind him. "Guess the big hero thought she'd get a free room, huh?" I swallowed the anger rising in my chest. Arguing wouldn't change anything. My back ached as I shifted the duffel higher on my shoulder. I looked past them at the house that I had practically built for them and realized I didn't belong there anymore. "Fine," I said quietly, though my voice trembled. "I'll go." Neither of them tried to stop me. I walked back to my truck, the gravel crunching under my boots, each step heavier than the last. As I tossed my bag into the passenger seat, I glanced one last time at the vineyard, the rows of vines stretching into the horizon. It was supposed to be home, but in that moment, it felt like I'd funded my own exile. I started the engine and drove away, the house shrinking in my rearview mirror. I didn't cry. I just felt hollow, like I had been erased from the very place I'd sacrificed everything to save. I sat on the tailgate of the truck that night, staring at the dark outline of the vineyard under the moonlight. My fingers were stiff from gripping the steering wheel during the drive, but that wasn't the reason my chest hurt. It was the realization that my father's words weren't just anger, they were truth. I had no claim here. None. 2 years ago, I was in Montana, living out of a motel room near the fire base. The days blurred together, dawn briefings, long flights over roaring flames, nights spent icing my shoulders and trying to sleep through the ache in my back. Then my mom called. "Elena, we found the perfect place," she had said, her voice trembling with excitement. "A vineyard in Sonoma. It's our dream, mija, but we need help. The bank wants too much, and your father can't— well, you know how things are." I remember sitting on the motel bed, half in my flight suit, staring at the ugly floral curtains while she painted the picture. A family business, a place where we could all grow old together. She spoke like it wasn't just an investment, but salvation. "Mom, that's a lot of money," I said, even as I pulled my laptop closer. I had nearly $700,000 saved. Every hazard paycheck, every bonus for flying into hell when others turned back. That money was supposed to be my future. "Think of it as a legacy," she told me softly. "Your brother can run the tasting room, your father can manage the fields, and when you're ready to settle down, you'll have a home. You'll always have a place here." That last line, "you'll always have a place here," broke me. I wired $600,000 to her account within the week. The paperwork? I never saw it. It's simpler for taxes if it's in our name, Mom said. Trust me, mija, we're family. I believed her. The first year, I kept sending money. I paid for a new irrigation system, a tractor, even a luxury studio that Mateo swore he'd use for marketing videos. Last I heard, he'd turned it into a podcast room, streaming wine reviews with LED lights and a fake brick wall. Now, standing out in the cold, I realized none of it belonged to me. Not a single grape, not a single board on that house. My name wasn't on any deed. My parents hadn't even mentioned me in interviews when local blogs praised the Vargas family's revival of the vineyard. I thought about walking back to the porch and demanding answers. But what would I say? Please, can I have my own home back? No. The humiliation was already complete. I climbed into the truck bed and pulled my jacket tight. The house lights glowed in the distance, warm and inviting, but I felt like a stranger on my own land. I had built their dream with my blood and savings. And somehow, I had built a life that didn't include me. The truck's bench seat was stiff, and the night air was colder than I expected. I lay under a blanket that smelled faintly of dust and motor oil, staring at the stars through the windshield. Sleep wouldn't come. My mind kept circling the same thought. I had built their dream, and they had thrown me out like a stranger. I pulled my duffel closer and dug out my old laptop. The glow of the screen lit up the truck cab as I started sifting through emails and bank records. Each line told the same story. Money wired from my accounts into my mother's. Payments for irrigation upgrades, solar panels, new barrels, even the renovations on that ridiculous recording studio Mateo bragged about on his podcast. Every dollar had gone through them, never once in my name. Scrolling through the transfers, I felt the same knot of anger and clarity tighten in my chest. This wasn't just family taking advantage of me. It was betrayal, and I had been blind to it for too long. Somewhere between Montana fire seasons, I'd met Celeste Rowan. She was an investigator for the state, sharp-eyed and blunt, the kind of woman who could find a needle in a haystack of financial fraud. I had helped her once with a wildfire contractor audit, providing flight logs and crew statements. I remembered her telling me, "If you ever need someone to follow the money, call me." It was almost midnight when I found her number. My hand shook as I dialed, but when she picked up, her voice was as steady as I remembered. "Rowan." "Celeste, it's Elena Vargas," I said. "I think I need your help." There was a pause. "The pilot? It's been years." "What's going on?" I told her, in short, clipped sentences about the vineyard, the transfers, and the fact that my name wasn't on a single document. I tried to keep my voice calm, though I could feel my throat tighten as I spoke. "Send me everything," she said without hesitation. "If what you're saying is true, this could be more than a family dispute. It might be criminal." I sat back, clutching the phone. Then it's time someone looked at the truth. Celeste promised to start immediately, and for the first time that night, I felt something other than anger. I felt steady. I didn't need to confront them, scream, or beg for what was mine. The facts would do that for me. I closed the laptop and leaned back on the seat, the cold air settling around me like armor. Tomorrow, I would start gathering every piece of evidence. I wasn't going to knock on their door again. I was going to let the truth do the knocking. The next morning, I parked at a roadside cafe just off the highway, its dusty windows giving me a clear view of the vineyard's main gate. My coffee tasted burnt and bitter, but I kept drinking. My hands curled around the warm cup as if it could steady me. At first, the only movement was the wind sweeping across the rows of vines. Then, at exactly 7 a.m., I saw them. 3 black SUVs rolling down the dirt road, headlights slicing through the early haze, government plates. My chest tightened. Celeste had been quick. I sat perfectly still as the vehicles stopped in front of the house. The first agents out were in dark jackets with bold white letters across the back. Federal Investigations Unit. 2 of them approached the porch while others fanned out, cameras and clipboards in hand. The front door opened. My father stepped out in his faded blue robe, looking like a man who'd been dragged from sleep and dropped into a nightmare. His posture was all defiance, shoulders squared and chin high. But even from this distance, I could see the flicker of confusion. "What's this about?" he barked, his voice carrying faintly across the field. The agents didn't flinch. One of them showed a badge and a stack of documents. My father's tone shifted, still gruff, but edged with uncertainty. Then my mother appeared behind him, wrapped in a shawl, her hands trembling. She tried to speak, but the agent with the clipboard stepped forward, asking direct questions. I saw her shoulders sag as if the weight of it all finally hit her. From the side of the house, Mateo stumbled out, his phone in hand, recording like this was another episode of his podcast. His smug expression faltered as two agents cornered him, one taking the phone, the other pointing toward the luxury studio he was so proud of. He started arguing, gesturing wildly, but they ignored his protests. I watched the scene unfold as if I were invisible. I felt no rush of victory, only a steady quiet inside me. They had made me an outsider in the home I paid for, but now that home had become something else entirely, a crime scene. One of the agents started photographing the new tractor, the wine cellar, even the barrels I'd paid for. My mother collapsed onto the porch step, her face in her hands. My father stood rigid, as if refusing to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing him bend. I took one last sip of my coffee and set the cup down. There was nothing left for me to say or do here. By the time Mateo shouted something and tried to wave down the agents, I was already starting the truck. I pulled onto the road without looking back, leaving the vineyard to its reckoning. The government office was colder than I expected, all white walls and fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly overhead. I sat at the end of a long table, my hands folded in my lap, while the investigators arranged files and recorders in front of me. It felt less like giving testimony and more like preparing for surgery, something painful but necessary. When the door opened, my family walked in as if they were being marched to their own trial. My father's glare found me instantly, hard and sharp. Mateo followed close behind, dressed like he was heading to a photo shoot rather than a legal meeting, his expensive watch glinting under the light. My mother trailed last, her face pale and drawn, but her eyes soft as if she'd rehearsed her sorrow. "Elena," my mother said in a low voice, almost a whisper, "we didn't think it would come to this." I kept my eyes on the table. Neither did I. Mateo pulled out the chair opposite me and leaned forward. "Do you even realize what you've done? You've destroyed the family over money." The laugh that slipped out of me was dry and humorless. "Money? I paid for every piece of that vineyard, for your failed podcast studio, for every repair, every luxury you bragged about online while I was risking my life in burning skies." Mateo's jaw clenched. "That's not fair." "What's not fair," I cut in, "is being told I'm a stranger in the house I bought for you." My father slammed his palm on the table, making the pens rattle. "You always wanted to be the hero, Elena, flying your planes, throwing money around, acting like you're better than the rest of us." I turned my gaze to him, my voice steady but soft. "I never wanted to be the hero. I only wanted to be your daughter." For a moment, the room went silent except for the faint hum of the overhead lights. My mother's eyes filled with tears, and she reached across the table, her hand trembling. "Mija, everything we did was for the family. We thought—" "You thought wrong," I interrupted, pulling my hands back. "You took my trust and turned it into a weapon. Don't tell me it was for the family when you left me out of everything that mattered." One of the investigators cleared his throat, reminding us this wasn't just a family dispute. I answered their questions calmly, laying out the transfers, the timelines, every fact I had documented. My parents tried to twist the story, framing it as a misunderstanding, but the evidence sat between us like a wall they couldn't climb. By the end, Mateo had stopped talking, leaning back with his arms crossed, his face tight with anger. My father stared at the floor, and my mother dabbed her eyes with a tissue, whispering something about forgiveness. I stood slowly, gathering my papers. "I'll give my testimony," I said, "but I'm done explaining why I mattered. I don't need you to understand anymore." As I walked out of that room, my chest felt hollow but lighter. For the first time in years, their grip on me was gone. By the following week, the story had spread across the valley like wildfire. "Decorated fire pilot exposes. Family fraud," one headline read, alongside an old photo of me in my flight suit, helmet tucked under my arm, standing in front of a water bomber. It felt surreal seeing my name everywhere, but not for the reasons I'd ever imagined. The coverage tore through my family's carefully curated image. Neighbors who once attended their wine tastings started canceling orders. A few bold ones even posted comments online, calling my parents thieves hiding behind a vineyard. Mateo's podcast sponsors dropped him overnight, and I saw a clip of him on social media, red-faced, blaming internet trolls for ruining his business. People I hadn't heard from in years sent me messages, Old firefighting partners, retired pilots, even a few families whose homes I had once helped protect. "Proud of you, Vargas," one email read. Another said, "Takes guts to stand up for yourself, especially when it's family." I read every single one, but none of it made me feel victorious. The truth was, I felt tired. Tired of fighting fires, both in the sky and in my own bloodline. All I wanted was silence, a chance to breathe without feeling like I owed someone something. I found a small apartment on the edge of town, cheap and quiet. The first night I slept there, the hum of the fridge was the only sound. I didn't unpack much, just a few clothes, my laptop, and a framed picture of my crew from the Montana base. I walked to the local market the next morning. A few people recognized me, nodding or offering a small smile. I knew they'd heard the gossip, but I didn't care. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself to anyone. A letter arrived 2 days later, written in my mother's neat, looping handwriting. I didn't open it. I already knew what it would say. Apologies coated with guilt. Please to fix this before it's too late. I slid it into a drawer and left it there. The vineyard was no longer my concern. Whatever came of the investigations, the debts, or the public shame, it belonged to them now. I had finally stepped out of their shadow, even if it left me standing alone. And for once, standing alone didn't feel like losing. The cabin was nothing like the sprawling vineyard estate, but it was mine. A small wooden structure tucked into the hillside, with a sagging porch and peeling paint, bought with what little remained of my savings. It wasn't much, but for the first time, I didn't care about appearances or approval. I just wanted peace. The first week, I threw myself into fixing the place up. I replaced broken porch boards, cleared out the musty old furniture, and patched the roof with my own 2 hands. It felt good. Honest work. The kind that left my muscles sore but my mind quiet. Each swing of the hammer reminded me I didn't need to earn anyone's permission to create a life worth living. I planted a small garden behind the cabin, a mix of vegetables and wildflowers. Watching the first shoots push through the soil gave me a strange sense of hope, like I was planting something for myself for once, not for someone else's dream. Every day, I walked the trails nearby, letting the silence of the hills and the whispering pines steady my thoughts. I hadn't realized how badly I needed that silence until I had it. About a month in, I found a letter in my mailbox. The handwriting was messy, but familiar. Mateo's. I stood on the porch, turning it over in my hands before finally opening it. "Elena," it began, "I don't know how to say this without sounding like a coward, but I'm sorry. I mocked you because I didn't know how to face the truth. You gave up so much for all of us, and I took advantage of that. I see it now. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to know I was wrong." I read the letter twice, then folded it neatly and placed it in a drawer. I didn't feel anger or triumph, just a calm understanding that I didn't owe him an answer. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't a gift I had to hand out just because someone asked for it. That evening, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sun dip behind the ridge. The sky was streaked with gold and violet, and the air smelled of pine and fresh soil. For the first time in years, I felt safe, not because someone had given me shelter, but because I'd built it for myself. I didn't know what the future would bring. Maybe the garden would flourish, maybe it wouldn't. But I no longer felt the weight of needing my family's approval to feel whole. As I leaned back in the old rocking chair, I realized that this quiet, this solitude, was worth more than anything I had lost. The forest behind my cabin had become my sanctuary. Most mornings, I walked the narrow trail that wound through the tall pines and oaks, the earth soft beneath my boots, the air cool and unhurried. Each step felt like a small reclaiming of myself, the woman who had spent years flying into walls of smoke and flame, desperate to save something. I realized I had spent just as much time trying to save my family's love, only to crash into the same walls over and over. I paused at a clearing where the sunlight broke through the branches in scattered beams. The silence here wasn't empty. It was alive, filled with birdsong, the whisper of leaves, the distant sound of the creek running down the hill. I let myself breathe it all in, feeling the tension I'd carried for so long finally loosen its grip. I thought of my years in the sky, of the roaring engines and the rush of diving low over a fire line, heat radiating up through the cockpit glass. People called me brave, even fearless. But as I stood there, I understood something I'd never let myself believe before. My greatest act of strength wasn't those daring flights. It was walking away from a family who had built their comfort on my sacrifices and choosing not to let their betrayal define me. The hurt still lived inside me. That wouldn't vanish overnight, but I was no longer bending under the weight of it. I didn't need their apologies, their recognition, or their permission to feel whole. I had stopped trying to be the daughter who earned their love through money and effort, and that, I realized, was its own kind of freedom. As I returned to the cabin, the setting sun painted the sky in warm streaks of pink and gold. I stood on the porch, hands resting on the railing I'd rebuilt with my own tools, and let the quiet settle over me like a blanket. Somewhere down the road, my family was probably still tangled in the consequences of their choices. That was their burden, not mine. For once, I wasn't angry, I wasn't bitter, I was simply free. I looked out at the horizon and thought, silence isn't emptiness, it's the space where I finally found myself. And with that thought, I turned and stepped inside, ready for whatever tomorrow brought.